It's a tricky subject because it is so emotive, and the word is so emotive, and how you touch that word and it explodes, you know? It's like a grenade in your hand, hate. I've never thought of it. I've thought a lot about love and whether humanity is naturally moral or immoral, but I've never thought about hate.
Okay.
When do you get to hate? What are the reasons we hate? And I suddenly ask myself, why don't I hate? And why do all these other people hate? And I wondered whether I do.
A good question to ask. Very few people I know, stand up proudly and say, I hate. Although in today's political climate, I think that's changing. I work with a lot of interesting people, and I get to hear some of their inner thoughts, And I find for the first time, I've been doing this for like 18 years, that people are proclaiming their hatred of certain elements of society, which is not, of course, unlike the way things were in the past. Here, we've had eras of open hatred and laws that reflected them. I find there's a drift back towards that arena.
For me, I do not want to let go of the idea that in the right conditions, the religious figures are right, that essentially man's nature is love. Voltaire just said basically, well, no, man's competitive. Thomas Hobbes said man is wolf to man, and we have a market system based on individual competition, and competition puts you against another and you've got a foe and a competitor.
Yes.
I personally can't get over my biases.
You don't see.
And acknowledge that it's intrinsic in man to hate.
You can't acknowledge that.
No.
But isn't it very evident? There's no shortage of examples, unfortunately, right?
Right.
Okay, fine. So wouldn't it be a better premise to start with that humanity is a hybrid of a hating and loving creature?
So where does that take you? I mean, does it take you to doom? I mean, if you accept that...
It takes you to possibility.
Right.
And free will. And in fact, free will would not be able to exist in the absence of that dynamic. Otherwise, we'd just be robots, just programmed to be good, so to speak, right? And if every positive action that we did was immediately rewarded, everyone would only do good. Starting with the assumption, in my opinion, that there's a battle always raging within a person. If I asked anyone here, if I paid you $1,000, would you spit in your grandmother's face? My assumption would be probably not. Probably you've worked yourself up to past that, right? But if I said, how about $100 million, now all of a sudden people are like, oh my, well, could I split it with her? But part of the condition would be you can't tell her. There's scenarios that you could build where like someone's morality gets stretched by circumstance. And we see all the time, and I think we see within ourselves, that there are things that we've said and done that we can't understand. How could I have said this hurtful thing to the person I'm closest with? Like, how could I have spoken to my mother that way? How could I have cheated on my taxes? How could I have, whatever it is, like everyone says, yes, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do this, and then they do it. And then they wonder why they did it. So if we reframe it as we have two basic elements, one that pulls us towards doing bad, and another that just equally powerful, or maybe slightly less, that pulls us towards doing good. And it's up to us. We're the arbiter of who we make ourselves into. If we choose more often the good, then we're gravitating in that direction. We're becoming good, and we're earning our own good as people because we chose it. And if we do the opposite, and we make, let's call them poor decisions, although it's a broader discussion as how do you know if your decisions are good or bad to begin with, then presumably you're going to draw yourself towards being a not good person, right? And I think that you can explain the dynamic in the world. You see bad people, you see good people, partially by what they inherited from their culture or parents or whatever, but also partially from the choices that they just made. they made themselves this way, which doesn't mean that they're irredeemable. You can always reverse, but it's going to be a fight to pull yourself up out of where you were. But there's many great stories. Everyone loves those stories of recovery from.
So if you see a murderer on the street and you kill him before he can kill someone else, are you being good?
In my opinion, yes.
So a lot of Nazis probably thought they were being good. What do you do with that?
Therefore, it opens the ultimate question, which is there a universal definition of that which is good? And there are consequences to the answer, or to the lack of answer, if there's not one. If there is a universal definition of good, A, what is it? B, how do you know what it is? If the Nazis really believed that they were good, or if the Taliban or ISIS or whoever, thinks we're the good ones and you guys are the corrupt and evil ones, then we have a conflict of worldview. And if we can't logically demonstrate why ours is superior, then it all just becomes opinion.
We have very different worldviews. And as long as we subscribe to a certain cultural worldview, we're going to run into conflict with other people, because effectively, when these cultural views collide, we're going to be insulted by those that don't subscribe to our view. We're going to be insulted in everything we do. Those things you hold sacred are going to be contradicted. And as open-minded as we can be, eventually acknowledging an alternative worldview will degrade our own. We're going to feel that we need to convert them to our view, because we're going to feel that by them not subscribing to our view, they're somehow not confirming our beliefs. And that will result in conflict. So, how do you reconcile two different traditions? You look at the elements that that bring people to engage in a tradition, and you look at the common elements in the different traditions.
Okay.
And when we do that, and we come to an idea of the essence of humanity that draws us all to faith and all to belief and all to traditions and all to cultural reverence, and we find that commonality, then we find the core of humanity that will tell us what's good and what's bad. And once we end up with a universal definition of good and bad, it's happy sailing from here. Whether that's right or wrong, what we come up with, at least we'll all be rowing at the same pace to the same rhythm. I certainly have hope that we can find a universal definition of good or bad. I mean, it could be someone says, well, actually, there's this tribe of Muslims in Morocco, and they live this ascetic life. Turns out they're right, and we just adopt it. Or we look to other sources for inspiration. We look to science, and we look to psychology, and we look to neuroscience, and we look to history, and we look inside ourselves and introspect and say, well, actually, it turns out that while I thought I was an individual, most of my emotions are shared by the other 7 billion people on the earth. And we see ourselves as part of that group of 7 billion people seeing the same thing. So I think there's a universal definition of good and bad out there. I just think we've got to work at finding it.
Does having a universal definition of good and bad actually serve any purpose?
There's no point in pursuing anything if there's no definition of what's good and what's bad, because it has no meaning anymore. And so it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what anybody does, because there's no determination that it's good or that it could be known as being good. So who cares? So it pleases you to rape and pillage. Okay, so what am I supposed to say about it? Like, it displeases me that you do it. So now I guess we have to try to kill each other to try to prevent you from doing it, because I think it's evil what you're doing. And you think it's evil that I try to stop you from doing it. So that, to me, and that's the formula to end in a dangerous place. If we agree, I think along the lines of what Stephen's saying, like, if there is some kind of commonality, then there's something to talk about. You know, but if there's not, it's over. The conversation is done from the get-go.
Right.
And furthermore, if I can't choose good, meaning that choice is not available to me, then I can't be held accountable for my actions because I couldn't help it.
So then we get into free will.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know a philosopher subject to more variant interpretation than Friedrich Nietzsche. Mm-hmm. And he said we'd move beyond good and evil when we looked within ourselves and we sought to find what it was that motivated us. That desire to love or that desire to hate, once we stopped overriding it with a moralistic assessment and value, we would have what he called a reassessment of values. But the difficulty is, to do that, we have to abandon tradition that tells us not to do that. You know, God told us not to murder people. That's what the stone tablets that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai prescribed, right?
Yes.
So when we look inside, and Nietzsche said, well, hang on a minute, deify our desire. If that desire is murderous, it's dangerous to deify it. And so we get so scared of doing that that we back off and we hold fast to Moses' tablets. But at the same time, we do that at a great cost of insight into what the truth of human nature is, and a great cost of insight into what free will is. Because if free will is the balance between love thy neighbor and kill him, we're in a precarious position. So I don't believe in good and evil, to put my cards on the table, and nor do I believe in free will.
Okay.
I believe that we subconsciously move to action based on the motivating emotion that dominates us and causes us to act. And it's very much the old Skinner box, you know, reward and punishment.
Okay.
How that works, though, in this highly complex mind of ours is in an abstract form. And what we have to do is work through those machinations of abstraction to find out why we end up either culturally obedient and traditional, or alternatively, we end up rejecting our cultural milieu and doing something different. Now, that's a really complex place to be.
Yes.
And a potentially dangerous place to be if you don't think that the better angels of our nature will eventually prevail.
But how can they if there's no free will? Because I won't be able to help myself. I'm programmed to be bad. I'm Jeffrey Dahmer. I eat people. What am I supposed to do?
It's just me.
I'm born that way.
Not going to kill a certain person based on what he thinks is right and wrong at the time.
He talks very eloquently. He thinks he's being perfectly logical. And his premise is that we all crawled out of some slime a few million years ago. There is no value to humanity. And therefore, he said, why should I try to moderate my behavior to keep it in acceptable ranges?
Then you have an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and someone would just pull out a gun and shoot him because he's harming the community.
Okay, but that's just a preference. Like some other people might say, leave the guy alone. I mean, like.
But I doubt it. I think the community would say, yeah, you're right, I shoot him.
Well, we tend not
so he wants to live by those rules.
We tend not to like that kind of killing.
Right.
Right, but there's other killing that we don't mind as much. Or at least defined as killing by some people. Let's put it that way. Like, so it's obviously an explosive issue, but, you know, abortion to half the population, at least at some stage, is wanton murder.
Right.
And to some other people, it's a simple procedure that has no meaning whatsoever.
Right.
Well, it's a pretty big dichotomy between those two positions. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you reconcile that?
Right.
You know, if there's no definition of what constitutes murder, then what do you do about it? And how do you know that what we're doing culturally is good or not good? If the baby's in the woman's body 15 minutes before birth, most people are extremely uncomfortable aborting at that moment. But interestingly, and I'm not putting my cards on the table.
Yeah.
I'm not putting them. There's no particular difference, one day before birth and one day after birth in a certain manner of thinking.
Yep, sure.
And again, either it means something or it means nothing. I think it's binary. Either there is purpose and meaning or there is no purpose and no meaning. And you know what? It's fine to conclude either way. But once you've concluded that there's no purpose and no meaning, then I don't see how you have the right to tell anyone what to do.
If there is an ultimate creator that determines your destiny, it's a relaxing thought because ultimately, it's determined by a force other than you, and it takes a lot of responsibility off you. But at the same time, if that ultimate creator with that ultimate will decides that, another person will be created and a woman is pregnant, it's difficult to reconcile that viewpoint with terminating that pregnancy. So I think because it's dependent upon belief and because belief is subjective, you've really got to leave it to the person who holds the baby and holds the belief.
You like philosophers, I could tell. Yeah?
Yes.
Pascal. Pascal's wager, it's called.
Right.
He basically said that if you can have a 51% level of confidence that there is that creator, then you should behave as though there is, because the upside is much greater than if there is and you don't do it. In other words, it's a gamble, but I think that it's a critical question. It's part of what we talk about, very often. Like, what more important question could there be than is there the existence of right and wrong in this world? And there have been, for centuries, many great minds who have, attempted to tackle the question. But I find that most people are unfamiliar with the argumentation of those minds. In other words, is there a compelling reason to believe it, or at least to have a moment of pause? Like maybe there is something here. Maybe it's not as unknowable as people think. I know I've certainly experienced in many discussions over the years that people tend to gravitate towards that outcome. Like, who knows?
Right.
Maybe this. I don't know. But I wonder if people are truly willing to live with the logical consequences of that position, which I believe to be the cessation of the concept of morality. And because many people hold that position, and I'm not blaming anyone for holding it, but and still moralize, which tacitly, to me, indicates that they really do believe that there is an absolute good and bad.
Why?
Because they won't let go of the idea that to do X, Y, or Z it's just wrong. You can't do that.
What about moral relativism? Like, within certain cultures, certain things are good or bad. Does that not exist?
I think moral relativism exists as a concept. Yeah. I just don't think it's right.
Right.
Just like...
So some cultures
But
are
you-
thinking their lives are wrong.
Clearly, because we have cultures that are in radical opposition to each other. So either you have to say that they're all right, in which case I forfeit my claim that what the Third Reich did was bad. That was a cultural preference. Or I have to say, no, that was what they did was evil and bad and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that I was really willing to fight and die to oppose it, as many millions of people did.
Yeah.
But why would I sacrifice my life for something that was just a cultural preference? Fighting it, it seems crazy to me. I'd rather just do what makes me happy
Right.
all the time.
Right. So you're saying if an atheist went to war to fight for what was right, he can't really be an atheist.
Right. I would say that. What is the definition of that which is moral? If it can mean anything, it doesn't have a meaning. I think morality means you can rape and pillage, and you think, and not only that, I think it's good to do it. And by the way, there have been many, many cultures in history who have thought exactly that.
Okay. Right.
But you think it's
Right.
not. Okay, so you have your idea and I have my idea. So basically what we're saying is there's no such thing. There is no such thing as right and wrong. And that's okay. That's okay. I think a person should have a little bit of backup for that claim. Although I don't think it's illogical per se to conclude that. I think that you could conclude that. I just think to be consistent, you got to go one way or the other. And it's fine to say I don't know just yet, but let's be honest about it. If you conclude it doesn't matter what you do, right and wrong is a culturally relative cultural preference, fine. But then be honest and say, like, I don't believe in right and wrong, and therefore because it's just your personal preference. In fact, you don't matter at all you don't matter as a human being, and I don't matter. We have no value. Nothing is real.
That was my question, because when you do something wrong,
Yeah.
as we know it,
As
so
the people here,
yeah,
I don't think
our society,
we don't even agree amongst ourselves, I would say.
For instance, raping,
Yeah.
it hurts physically. It hurts.
In certain cultures,
And emotionally.
but I agree with you, and I think it's horrible. But in some cultures, it's perfectly fine.
But
Wait,
the meaning
wait,
of rape,
in some cultures it's
the meaning
perfectly
of rape,
fine.
I'm sorry,
But maybe-
it's forcing yourself on top of someone.
Yes.
For that someone who's the victim,
Yeah.
it hurts.
In some cultures, it's perfectly fine.
Even for the
But
woman
then
getting
if
raped.
it's fine for
Even
the
for the
woman,
person.
It's not
or
irrelevant what the woman
victim.
wants.
But when you say in some cultures it's perfectly fine for who?
For the man to force himself upon a woman,
But
What
then
about the woman? What does she do?
it doesn't matter.
But then it hurts for her.
It does, but that doesn't matter in that culture.
Okay. It's really sad.
It is.
Okay, that's a great example.
Right.
But that's a wonderful, wonderful, horrific, and horrible and terrible example
Yes.
of why nobody has the right today to prescribe right or wrong pursuant to a cultural tradition. Because clearly, in a lot of views, that cultural tradition causes a lot of pain to an individual.
Yep.
And overcomes their free will. And so
If it exists.
if it exists. So, well, their expression of will. Let's put
Okay.
it that way.
Okay.
So the idea is that there must be various needs that people have, and people don't exist individually. We're not the only person on earth. So the question is that given our social interdependence, our empathetic needs, the essential nature of we have to have mutual support. The question is, what are our needs? And what are all the individual needs in that social context? And how do we create a society that best fulfills all of those needs? Now, one of those needs is an answer to the ultimate question, who is my creator? Because otherwise we live in anxiety saying, is this meaningful or meaningless?
Yes.
Right?
That's very well put.
So that cannot be answered, though, by any tradition that we have in 2018.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure that all of the faiths are no more right or no more wrong than each other.
Okay.
And I'm sure that each of them indicate to a more fundamental need of humanity,
Okay.
which is the resolution of the ultimate question that is resolved by the wise people of the community hundreds or thousands of years back and repeated by ritualistic confirmation within these communities. Now, whether or not they've evolved over time to actually find the meaning of what human needs are and how to fulfill them in the best way, or whether or not they have repeated traditions that are not based on insight into humanity, is a judgment call when you look at each of the faiths. But ultimately, I think we've risen beyond that monocultural view, mono-religious view, and we've come to a place where we can actually look to the sciences, and we can look to rationality, and we can look to the bits we can explain and the wisdom that we've collected. I think we're at a stage now where we have to be responsible to the world, and we have to source all of these different perspectives, and we have to seek that commonality and move beyond traditions that have lasted for thousands of years, but effectively they're useful before your community is in contact with other communities. When your community is in contact with other communities, they give rise to hate.
They can, sure. Though I would, thank you. I would argue that it's possible to maintain your distinctiveness in your community and still have a viable sense of love and support of someone who is very much unlike you.
If you believe in a specific cultural tradition, you believe the others are wrong. And then when you define good and bad, you define it by your cultural tradition, and you believe the others define it wrong. When Buddha says there's no single God and you believe there is a single God, you believe the Buddhists are wrong. And if you believe in the Ten Commandments, you believe that they are contradicting God's word. And as a consequence, their life becomes of less value because it's misguided. And you cannot have a monocultural tradition and not promote hate.
But I don't hate Buddhists.
No, right, you wouldn't, because you're a moral person.
Whatever morality is, yes.
Right, but then you've got the Taliban going.
Well, you must have a lot of Zionists hating as well, and you've got a lot of Hamas hating as well. Once you define good and bad, and you say there exists good and there exists evil, and it exists within my cultural tradition on these terms, you are in a world of trouble. Because there are a lot of people that will adopt what you say, and when other people have a slightly different version that doesn't fit, it only fits 60%. 33% of what Buddhists are doing is evil, right? Now, that will give rise to at least some type of antipathy within the mass consciousness of a tradition other than Buddhism, and ultimately could give rise to an active antipathy, which is hate.
Okay, but in that particular example, I don't think that that's actually transpired. I don't know anyone who has antipathy for Buddhists except for
The Muslims in Myanmar.
In certain places, but there's more regional things taking place that are that might be fueling that. Like Buddhists don't bother anybody. Like they have their philosophy. I happen to personally think the philosophy is not complete.
Why is the Buddhist faith incomplete?
In my opinion,
Yes.
because they don't believe in God.
And on what basis should they?
That's a very big discussion, and one that I'd be happy to have at a different time.
No, okay.
But because I personally think that there's ample evidence to suggest that that's the reality. And then I have the issue that I've already outlined today, which is that if there isn't that reality, then there's no such thing as morality, right? And therefore I have an issue with that. I'm not going to ever hurt any of them. Verbally, physically, I will take them out for coffee.
But that's
I will be very happy.
But that's you.
I think
People without such a sophisticated appreciation of human nature will find that disbelief in God is pretty fundamental Because Moses came down from Mount Sinai declaring that there was one God, and that those that worshipped anything else were effectively evil, which is bad, which is not good, which is destructive. Now,
I would not say evil. I would say misguided or simply lacking knowledge.
right, or in Nietzsche's terms, bungled and botched, or inferior in some way. Lacking knowledge is not a good trait.
Well, we all lack knowledge to some degree, but
But this is the majority of the world lacking knowledge.
it's a big chunk of the world.
Now that's tough, because what you've got is you've got a group of people who believe that there are ignorant people who make the greatest faith on earth, and the most scientific faith on earth, and the most philosophical faith on earth, and one that doesn't need belief, can actually exist with rationalism and science as being inferior. And that's going to be tough, because the more you get into the justification of Buddhism, the closer it comes to concepts of nihilism, and the more logical it becomes. And faith-based religions become less logical, and unfortunately God gave us the power of rationality. And so we can get to places where there becomes, if you start to justify Buddhism against any other faith-based religion, a point at which it becomes very personally insulting, and it becomes a reason for hate, because the whole worldview and the whole reason a person has lived for Muhammad, or for God, or for Jesus, or for some Hindu god, or for some ancient Greek combination of gods. You say, actually, sorry about that, 50 years on earth, all good, but you believed the wrong things. You sought inspiration from the wrong sources. And there's no way someone that's told that after 50 years of life will not hate the person that delivers that message. If someone pits rationality against belief and is compelling, there's no way you can't hate them. In fact, you probably kill them. So the point of the matter is that it's really important to take rationality, and this has always been my problem, because I was brought up in a very strict Christian faith, but I kept asking myself, God, why did you give me rationality that contradicts you? And as a consequence, I've looked for a universal explanation and found nothing better than the nihilism of Buddha and the nihilism of Nietzsche, and the great misrepresentation and misinterpretation of both by traditions that believe in a dichotomy between good and bad and can't exist in that netherworld of the non-existence of good and bad and the non-existence of concepts and a universal whole.
So do you think that we should not oppose evil, as the Buddhists do?
Buddha says that there's a unity of all. And Buddha says that when you understand that unity of all, you reach enlightenment.
But not everyone's there.
And Buddha says that everything has a cause. And Buddha says when you understand those causes, you'll see that when you send a ripple out into that energy, that ripple will come back to you and will enlighten your life. Nietzsche says, beyond good and evil, you have the desires of humanity. If you love humanity and you have faith in humanity and you truly trust humanity, you can let go of any single faith or culture, and you can let humanity express itself. So in that they do have a version of good or evil, it's just not simplistic. It requires you to divest yourself of the simple categories that order the way you see the world, and it requires you to have a universal vision, which is a complex vision.
Universality is an amazing thing. It's also, in my estimation, very utopian and not necessarily reality-based. That there is a reality that plays out day in and day out. And you can say, yeah, listen, we should all get along. Let's all hold hands, and everything will be great. If you would just simply realize that I'm good and you're good, and we're all in this together, let's stop killing each other, and yet across the globe, we see that that's not working. And so Buddha said whatever he said 2,500 years ago, and has had certainly an impact on one region of the world, a region that is extremely passive in terms of their approach to evil. If you look at the Tibetan culture, which on the one hand, I guess it's beautiful that they're not trying to oppose their Chinese oppressors. On the other hand, they're probably going to die as a culture, and I'm not convinced at all that it's a good or moral thing to not resist Chinese oppression. And by the way, I think there's a lot to learn from Buddha, and I think there's a lot to learn from Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist thinkers, and I am very interested in it. But if you ask a Buddhist, which I have, where did the world come from? Their answer is, it's always existed, which is not the case, at least in terms of rationality, what science says, that there was a beginning to reality.
Adam, come on.
Yes.
I got to stop you there.
Okay.
You have no idea where the world came from.
I don't?
No.
Okay. But did it come from nothing?
I have no idea.
You believe in the Big Bang?
I was born in the 60s, and I have no idea, and that's because no one before me knew, and no one today knows.
But you said you're rational. You believe in science. So science.
And I believe at the
Science
end,
is saying.
I believe the science is saying that they think there was a Big Bang and the world's expanding and it's the universe, and that's all great. But no one knows where the Big Bang came from. No one knows where atoms came from. No one knows any of that. And
So we should be circumspect as to whether there's a creator.
Exactly, because it doesn't matter. The fact is we're here, and the fact is we're incapable of knowing what billions of years ago happened.
You can't know that we're incapable of knowing. You can just assert it as an article
I
of
can
faith.
say from my observations and introspection of my own consciousness and my communications with others, I haven't known of any witness to the first cause, okay? And from logical deduction, I can only say that I don't know whether one day nothing became something or something already existed. Whichever belief you want to adopt, that's fine, because there's no evidence for either.
But there's a whole scientific order of evidence that is called the Standard Model. It's the basis of modern cosmology.
There's a theory about the Big Bang and the universe expanding, and therefore there being some massive black hole that exploded and caused all of the universe and the planets. And then go back to Socrates' apology, where he apologized for confessing he didn't know, and he died for not knowing. Now that's the foundation of modern philosophy, and we all should accept that when he went to the wiser men, he found that they were inferior to him because they thought they knew, and he knew he didn't.
Okay.
And it's that inability to exist in a state of ignorance that is the enemy of wisdom.
Okay.
And we cannot claim to know whether something happened at some time that caused the existence of all of the matter, which includes us, this bench, and me, and you,
Right.
and the other 7 billion people, and the earth, and the universe. We just don't know. So chill out and say, we don't know.
Okay. Fine. But there's consequences to that as well. If we don't know, then there's a logical possibility that there is a all-powerful creator who did bring it into existence.
Correct.
Okay, fine.
There's also no harm in speculating. Isn't the problem with the haters in that scenario? Because it seems to me that atheists get so argumentative towards other people's religions, it's like it becomes offensive when people believe.
And your beliefs are causing
You
problems.
can believe
That
anything
is
you
the
want,
problem,
but
the
once
fact that we're not letting people believe what they want
once
to
you
believe anyway.
base moral systems on things that are merely belief, then you cause hatred. So take
But
the idea of
isn't the
creation.
solution
No.
to to deal with the haters?
I already disagreed with you before you posed the question. And now you've posed the question, I disagree with you again.
And I love that.
The point is, once you take that fundamental answer, why I react so violently to the supposition that it's wrong to say the world always existed, or the world didn't and a creator made it, is because of the evil consequences that follow.
Right.
And the evil consequences are a narrowness of vision. The evil consequences are, well, ultimately it is. Ultimately, that's exactly what, and we always invoke it. We always invoke it because it's simple.
Yep.
Nazi Germany. Okay. Everybody should believe the way I believe. Everyone should do the way I do, and everybody therefore will die who doesn't.
But a
right?
broad vision would embrace Nazism.
No, a broad vision would not embrace Nazism. The fact of the matter is that we're talking about Buddhism here that has a different view. There's no actual individual creator. The world always existed. Fine.
Right.
Both of them are wrong because there's no evidence for either. Okay. So what we have to do, even though our mind seeks conclusion, is exist in that uncertainty. And therefore we have to refer to what we know is certain. And what we know is certain is what passes through our consciousness. And what we know for certain
Assuming
is...
our consciousness is reliable, which it may not be.
Well, I mean, the way we interpret things is inherently unreliable, and that's the science of the subconscious, which is that we attribute, motivations to our actions, which are probably untrue. But that's the area of exploration, right? Now, why do the Buddhists need to believe that we've always existed? And why do other faiths need to believe that there's a creator? Because huge consequences come from that.
I agree with that.
Because if you believe there's a creator, and you know who the hell he is, and you know where he lives, and you know what his beliefs are, holy crap. I mean, my God, he created the whole goddamn universe in existence, so you better do what he says, or he'll either create or decreate you, or expunge you. Decreate's not a word. So the point of the matter is this, that belief has huge consequences. And since it's merely a belief, don't let it have consequences.
But everything is merely a belief.
No, that's not right.
Why not?
Because that's a matter of wordplay. In our brain, we have memories, right? And things that happened a long time ago, such as me arriving at this office,
yes,
are less clear than things that happened a second ago, which is me starting the sentence, right? The impression in my brain of the recent event is stronger. Okay. So there are sense impressions on my mind, and that's the subtotal of anything that's reliable. Now, the rest of it, all of these ideas about how that coheres and what all that means, there's a whole lot of different views on that, okay?
Okay.
And you can take them, but don't fight for them. The minute you fight for them, or the minute you believe those bits are right or wrong, whether you're a Muslim, or you're a Jew, or you're a Christian, or you're a Buddhist, or you're a Hindu, or you've just joined some strange
Nazi
cult, or you're a Nazi, right? Don't rely on it, because if you're a Nazi, if you absolutely believe in the illogical, completely unjustifiable view that one culture is inferior to another, do not act on it, because it's just a crazy, goddamn, worthless belief which is not a stage for action. So Nazis, and we keep vilifying Nazis, but isn't everyone that believes in a monocultural truth a Nazi?
Well, is it a monocultural truth to say that there is no truth? Is it, you're asserting something in the face of what many monocultural people assert, right? So you're saying you guys are incorrect. I don't see a particular difference. You're professing a certain secularized version of, like, I'm correct, and all of Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam are all wrong because they adhere to this version of the way the world is.
No, I'm not. That's absolutely the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying that if each person on the earth looks within themselves, they'll see a source of their memories, they'll see a source of their morality, and they'll see a source of their beliefs.
Okay.
And they'll see them in different ways. They'll be cognitively different because they end up with different beliefs. But emotionally, a Hindu will have the same strength for their beliefs as a Buddhist, as a Christian, as a Jew, as a Muslim.
Yep.
And then they will see that what holds their beliefs so strongly with them and what codes their life and their moral action is the same as every other faith.
So
right?
people strongly believe their beliefs.
Correct. And they'll feel that sense of emotion for their beliefs. They'll feel that sense of devotion for the moral code they were taught. But what they will learn is there's a difference of the way it feels to see this bottle in front of me and to believe that the world was either created by an individual on a particular date called God, or alternatively it already existed. They're different things. Now, everyone has a right to those different explanations and visions that are exactly the same felt and thought, but they don't have a right to say that my belief in that is wrong or right. But they can't tell me the bottle doesn't exist, because we can bring in 1,000 people who report that that bottle exists. So what we're saying is in every single part, every single idea in our brain, there is a different level of verification for the ideas that we have.
Yeah.
And therefore, there is an objective, not objective, but a vote. Like, just come in and scientifically measure by all the different analyses of matter that bottle's there, right? And you can say, well, that got to 99% on the I'm bloody sure scale, right? But that bit about 10 billion years ago, some dude kind of created the universe, that's got to 0.0001% on the reliability scale. So I'll base my actions, so I'm not going to do that because it'll cause that to happen, right? But I do something much more severe than spilling crap on this table. What I do is I believe in a creator and I believe in a morality, right? That means that I end up killing other people because I believe in that creator, which is a 0.001% possibility of verification. That's not completely...
It's 100%
No, because that's the
subjective.
definition of subjective or objective.
No, it's not.
I just told you sense impression
It's an
versus
emotional
belief.
position that you happen to hold.
No, it's not.
Yes, there is. You like philosophy? There's oodles and oodles of philosophy that demonstrate the very effectively, in my opinion, the existence of a singular creator. And until a person has explored that thoroughly and made themselves familiar with the historical record in that philosophy, we haven't begun to really look at it. It can't be. It's not 0.00 anything. It's depending on who you are. It's very certain. Christopher Hitchens couldn't deal with the fine-tuning of the universe, which is an argument for the teleological argument, as it's called, right? The argument from design that he couldn't overcome because the universe absolutely does appear to be created. There are about 20 different factors by which, if the universe was tuned any differently, the universe could not possibly have existed. Certainly could not have produced life. And all secular science acknowledges as a problem, and they have reached for very fanciful explanations as to try to shore up the difficulty. It's not nearly as simple as I think my friend is presenting it. There's plenty of evidence that needs to be explored before we conclude whether or not the Buddhist community, who I love and respect, is correct on this particular point, or that they are incorrect. And it's okay, in my estimation, to be incorrect about something. We make judgments all the time. When you pass a law, you're saying that to do something this way is wrong, and to do it this way is right. We're fine with limiting options and declaring things right or wrong, whether it's by majority rule or by other means. But so as such, I don't see why it's problematic to declare that I hold this particular belief, and I think that your belief is incorrect. I can still like you, and we can still have coffee and drinks, and but why can't I hold my position and still respect you as an individual?
Right, and you've seen a lot of evidence because of your job. You've seen a lot of evidence where it's not possible. You see the worst of
You can do it. And you should do it.
Right.
Yeah, and you absolutely have a right. Every individual has the right to a belief, but it's when they actually act on it. It's when they define good and bad around it. And it's when they become closed to other beliefs.
You're saying that's bad.
I'm saying
But you're saying doing the same thing.
I'm saying that's the great. No. Well, how am I doing the same thing?
Well, because
By
you're
declaring
saying when
something
they do
right or
this,
wrong.
It's so wrong for people to do that. So you're yourself saying
Right,
it's so wrong.
but so the objective measure that I'm taking, right, which is my belief, is there's a difference between sense impression and belief, and I'm saying that we are not so insensate as to be incapable of understanding the difference. We do have the ability to distinguish between those things that we've observed and those things that we've created to shore up gaps in our knowledge. Those things we've created to shore up gaps in our knowledge are called belief. Now, those things we've observed are limited and totally unsatisfying because they don't explain the whole universe, they don't explain our reason for being here, they don't explain specifically what our morality should be or not. But the point of the matter is that there must be a time at which we stop judging people by reference to the beliefs that we have, because we recognize that the quality of other people's beliefs is identical to ours, be that strong or weak. And we see inequality between us and the other 7 billion people that exist, and we're not so arrogant as to think that our explanations are superior to others, because rationally that can't be right. Those things, you have to understand the limitations of human ability, which is just to observe and apply that thing called the brain to what you've observed and form a view of the world based on that. And then leaps of faith that simplify the world, that reduce the complexity for us. And all cultures engage in that leap of faith to reduce the complexity. It's when we make the mistake of believing in that leap of faith as being an ultimate truth that we cause harm to others.
So you don't believe in ultimate truth?
I believe absolutely in ultimate truth.
You do?
I do. And I believe that humanity, in its efforts to find it, knows it. And it's sitting right here in your mind.
Why do you believe that?
Because we end up getting bogged down in definitions, but ultimate truth is what 7 billion people see.
Do you think this glass is the ultimate truth?
I think I perceive that glass, and I think if I ask you, you see it. I think if I ask Tim and Mari and Rory, we all see it, right? And as a consequence, we could say that is as close, the existence of that glass is as close to ultimate truth, just that's a word, it's just a bunch of words. The ultimate and absolutely indisputable truth that exists. So if people come up and they say that that glass didn't exist, we can find in a court of law they're wrong because we've got many indicia that it did, within the limitations of our ability to report the existence of the glass, right? But if people turn up and they say God's dead, we shouldn't lock them up because no one knows whether God ever lived, because no one ever saw it, and there's no report of it, and there's just a bunch of people saying my solution to the ultimate ignorance of humanity is that there's a God, right? And there's nothing to observe it, there's no film, and there's no eyewitness reports. So yes, there is ultimate truth. Ultimate truth is that which is relayed to a human being by sense perception and reported by multiple observers as being existent. The rest of it is on varying levels of reliability.
Yep.
How do you say truth becomes less reliable over time?
Yes.
So,
See why I wanted you guys?
yeah, totally.
It makes perfect sense.
We can keep going. The truth of the matter is that this glass, I don't want to go into it, but that's illusory to begin with. If you go down to the molecular level, the glass is barely there. And it's more like information than it is actually a glass. Furthermore, we have absolutely no idea whether our sensory perception is correct. There is the famous brain in the vat experiment, which tells us that every single thing that we experience could be false. And in which case, we could end up in a place, of course, where like I was saying earlier, where nothing actually has any import. And I think the question is, what side of that philosophical equation do we choose to come down on? Certainly, I think, here's what else. If everyone was having these kinds of discussions, I think the world would be a better place.
I totally agree.
And I think ultimately we agree on most of this. I think maybe we're just coming at it from different angles. But
what I'm saying is, I believe, as Adam rightly pointed out, it's merely a belief. I believe I know better that glass existed than that a God exists.
Okay.
Right?
Is that belief of faith?
Yeah, I have a faith. I have a faith that things that have made a sense impression on me are more real than things that I have been told by tradition.
There are so many things that can't be explained.
Right. So I'm entitled to believe in any God I want, right? And I'm entitled to believe that plant's my God, right? And that the reason it's wilted is because of the strength of my argument. So I'm entitled to believe that, okay? And no one's entitled to contradict me, because that's all it is, a belief. No one should be offended by it. The plant's my God. I lie down before it every day and I meditate before it. So, but when I look at other people, I shouldn't say you're all inferior because you haven't realized that plant's a God, right?
Right.
And what I should say is, though, that people that say that glass doesn't exist, certainly because of the mass reporting of its existence and the ability of me to see it, that's where we should be focusing our concentration, on the commonality of the experience of consciousness and the strength of the emotions that actually sense impressions invoke, rather than actually deriving a morality from a belief that has no basis to make it stronger and more viable than beliefs that contradict it. We should assimilate all beliefs that exist, put them all in the same basket, and say, I acknowledge that Muhammad riding out his wisdom, which was profound, on the saddlecloth of his horse, is just as good as Jesus heading into the Temple of Jerusalem and smashing the goddamn thing, and just the same as Moses with his, 10 commandments that he busted because he got a bit angry when he got to the bottom of Mount Sinai, or Buddha sitting under the goddamn banyan tree and saying no self exists, or the myriad of other explanations for profound enlightenment. They're all the same. And I have no basis for belief in one of them over the other. And therefore, what I'm going to do is look to the commonality of what these people are doing, which is creating an explanation for that which they don't understand, and relying on the traditions and the stories that they've been told through their culture over years. And I'm going to base my life on it. But I'm not going to impose it on anyone else, because I'm going to have respect for them like I have respect for myself.
My only final comment, perhaps, is I do not think it's correct that there is no basis of a stronger claim to veracity from one tradition to the other, just as much as I think that you could make a case that capitalism has benefited the world more than socialism.
Right.
And I think that path of all ideas are equal is false, leads to moral confusion, and is counterproductive ultimately to the betterment of humanity. That's one. Second is, I don't see why it has to be a pejorative thing. If that plant is someone's God, for me to point out that that plant is not the totality of existence, and there may be something far grander, and there may be reason to believe that that's the case. It's not insulting to somebody, and any more than pointing out that there's a better golf club that a person could go to. You like golf? This is the most incredible golf club ever. Yes, why don't you just check it out? Or even not check it out. You do what you want. I'm not going out and proselytizing it. Proselytizing is against at least my faith. And as such, there doesn't have to be tension inherent to a disbelief or a disagreement about philosophical systems. But that's it. That's my only point.
Can I have a final word? I so desperately disagree with that, because the belief in the plant was my entire vision of the world is dependent upon my belief of that plant.
Are you religious at all?
I'm religious. I believe there's a whole lot I don't understand, and I believe there's a whole
Were you brought up Christian or?
I was brought up Christian, so I still fear taking the Lord's name in vain, because that's inherent in me. And do I believe that I have any understanding of whether that's true or not? No. But do I think that there's not a God? No, because I'm not qualified to comment on it. So, Pascal's equation. I err on the side of believing in a divinity that exceeds my own wisdom.
We're all going to be smiling.
A young man and said, I want to sit in that chair one day. That's my goal. And so he gets up, he says, well, go right ahead. You can sit now. It's not about the chair you sit in. It's about the things that you can do. And that's really leadership. And what I want to address specifically, because this is really my first conversation with all of you, is the doubts that leaders have. And I'll tell you why I want to talk about it. I was really, when the fellas and the folks over at h.com/live wanted me to do this, I was thinking, like, what's the opening message? What do I want to give people that I think is important? And I'll tell you what I think is important. I'll tell you, why I think it's important? Because I feel like I never really got this message, and it took me a long time to get there. So I'd like to kind of jumpstart people. And that's the doubts that leaders have. The doubts that leaders have. And, it's very hard, because a lot of us, you start your careers bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you want to get out there, you want to do stuff, and you take a look at the person in the CEO chair, you take a look at the person in the chairman's chair, the president's chair, whatever structure you have, and they look so polished, and one of the things is, I believe in a good leader is that they can show strength when things are difficult, right? Which means, there's this craziness, especially like Corona. Let's use Corona as a perfect example. Corona hits. I'll use myself as an example. I think that's a fair example, since we are on the ACE channel here. So all of a sudden Corona hit, and we shut down our main building. We have a huge building called the ACE World Center, right? The Dan Family World Center, and we get 150,000 people there a year. And our numbers in the last 4 or 5 years have gone from 30,000 to 150,000 people. That's a large jump. And we worked really hard in that building to pack it, to build it. And then all of a sudden Corona comes and it's gone. We shut down the building. I mean, literally, the building is dark now. We can't really do anything with it. And so that's a first hint that, something's coming. And then we start to look at our budget, and we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years to kind of building ourselves up. But like most nonprofits, we don't have a huge reserve, right? We don't have an endowment for various reasons. It's something we want to do for the future, but it's not something that we have. So all of a sudden we're looking at, And I have to tell you something. I'm going to be very open here. And that's, I guess, my goal for a lot of these conversations is, I said this is my CFO, Jamie Fymess, a terrific guy, one of the best, most talented guys I've ever worked with. I woke up, I remember it was a Wednesday morning, with just the most nauseous feeling in my stomach. And I'm generally a very go with the flow type of guy. And, okay, well, that we'll go this way, go that way. We'll figure out a way through. And I just woke up nauseous because I was just looking, our revenues are rentals of that building, which are quite significant. Our rentals are philanthropy, donations. Our revenues are a whole bunch of streams. And it was just basically over. And I woke up on a Wednesday morning and, I called Jamie. I spoke to some of the other folks in leadership and said, we have to pivot and move. And I'm telling you all this, and we could, in another episode, we could talk about the specific moves that we made, because I think you'll all learn a lot from it. But I'm telling to you because I didn't call them up like, okay, I'm nauseous, going to throw up, hold on. When I call my guys, you have to, even if, you have a churning in your stomach, you could tell people I'm a little uneasy, but you have to show strength. And it's not being fake. I want to be clear about that, right? Because I really believe you have to be who you are, right? The worst thing you could do is try to be what you're not, okay? At any seminar you go to and anyone you speak to, they're going to talk about, find out what your strengths are. Some people are speakers, some people are writers, some people are organizers. Do what you're good at. But when you're in the top seat, you have to show a certain amount of strength, right? Meaning you have to call people, and people are worried and they're concerned, and they're right to be. So number one is you validate that, you validate it, but you also tell them, okay, we're gonna figure this thing out. Now, what you're thinking in your head, some of you, is like, well, how can I say that when I have no idea what I'm going to do? And to be honest with you, that Wednesday morning, I will tell you right here, right now, that Wednesday morning, I did not know what we were going to do. I didn't know. I knew that something had to be done. And I knew that I had a queasy feeling in my stomach that I didn't normally have. And I've gone through other recessions, other issues, other serious issues in my career. That's not, but I realized this was something different. Now, I didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but I knew that we had to figure it out. And so therefore, when we're speaking to people, you have to convey that confidence, right? And you could be open and say, look, I'm not 100% sure where we're going now, but I'm telling you right now, we're going to solve this. I heard a statistic many years ago, which I have pretty much almost lived by. And that statistic is, or I don't know, statistic, it was a study, but someone said to me that people would rather work for a boss that they don't like, who makes decisions, than a boss they like who doesn't make decisions. Now let's break that down for a second, okay? Now, by the way, I know what you're thinking. It's best to work for a boss you like who makes decisions. I agree. But let's break down the two sides of that coin for a second, right? People would rather work for a boss they don't like who makes decisions. Why is that? Because in general in life, people are very uneasy when things are not concrete, right? They're not concrete. We don't know. We don't love the unknown. And sometimes we need decisions, and we need to know that someone's making those decisions, right? So you may not like a boss. He's a little gruff. He's a little rough. But at the end of the day, I know what I'm supposed to do. That gives me a certain amount of how to move forward, right? How to focus, what to do. For bosses that we like, but every time you come to, should we do this? They say, well, I don't know, this, do that. This, by the way, this point I'm making here is one of the most important points, I think, to drill home, right? Which is, not only do you have to show confidence, okay, that's one. That's just not getting people worried, because if they see the boss is worried, if you think back to your parents, right? When mom and dad are nervous, the whole family gets nervous. So bosses, you need to be confident in a certain way and say, look, I get it, right? I'm not delusional, right? I'm not making believe there's no problem, but I'm telling you, we're going to get to a solution. And then the way you get to that solution, and this is where I think I want to break down the two sides of that coin, the way you get to that place, right, is by someone making decisions. One of the most common issues that I see in nonprofit management, for-profit management, any type of management, right, is when people are, it's something we like to call wishy-washy, right? They're wishy-washy, right? right? What it means is, you sit around the table and say, okay, this is our strategy. We need to do this, right? We want to accomplish this. I'll use online learning since we're online here, right? We just had 1 million folks come to H.com last month. We want to get to 1.1 million. We'd like to put another 100,000 eyes on what we're doing. And so therefore we're going to take the following 3 to 4 measures. By the way, 3 to 4 is an important number. More than 3, generally, people's brains explode. So 3 to 4 is a good number for that stuff. We're going to put together 3 to 4 strategies and we're going to go. And then what happens is, right, and thankfully it doesn't happen. The H.com crew is great. It doesn't happen by them. But sometimes you'll have, in poor management, a couple days later, you know what? I was speaking to someone. I know we just all agreed on these 3 points that we're going to be focused on, but now I think we need to do these other 2 points that go in the opposite direction. Okay? Let me tell you something extraordinarily important about businesses and organizations. Okay? Very important. If you don't remember anything else, you remember that you need a cup of water when you're doing one of these, right? And you're going to remember what I'm about to tell you. Okay? Businesses and organizations, okay, nonprofits, for-profits, they're like big cruise ships, right? What do I mean by cruise ships? Maybe it's not the best terminology to be using during Corona, since most of them are not on the seas right now, right? But they're like big cruise ships. You can tell me, let's make a right, okay? And I could turn that wheel all the way to the right. Cruise ships don't turn like this, okay? Cruise ships turn like this. Right? You like the special effects? That was like 3D, right? Cruise ships, they turn like this slowly because that is what it takes to change on a dime like that. And one of the things I think that sometimes leaders don't realize, managers, people who are up top, they don't understand that, like, to get the buy-in that you need from all the different folks, it's not simple to bring everything together, right? You bring it together, you get it focused, and you move it. And if you want to change the other direction, and I'm not just talking about Corona. Corona happens, you have to make some changes. That's true. But I'm talking about in general, there are people that they're drawn to change like a moth to a light. And I'm only saying that because there's a light right up there behind me. So I'm thinking about it. You get the moths around the lights, they can't help themselves, and then they kind of, burst into flames, right? It's like, it's this ADD approach to management. Like, let's change. Let's change. It doesn't always work that way. And sometimes management is boring. You know why it's boring? Because we set our goals and we're sticking to them. And if people think that's boring, it's okay. So let's go back to what I was saying before, which is that people would rather work for a manager who makes decisions. When I come in, he says yes or no. I know concretely what I need to get done, and I can go get it done. Then a manager they like who can't make decisions and keeps reversing change in all different directions, right? Now, this is exceptionally important. And what I'm trying to paint the picture here is, number one is, when things happen like they've happened, number one, you have to keep calm. And again, I'm saying this, and no one said this to me, and that's why I'm telling you, even though you're queasy inside and you're just not sure what to do right now, this is your responsibility. You took it on, right? And you're going to figure it out. And people need to know that. And it's okay to tell them it may take me a day or two. And I want you to know, we decided that Wednesday on a strategy, and we were able to implement it in a week. I would say by Tuesday night, I'd have to go back and check the exact things, but by Tuesday night, we're able to do a call around the whole organization after we'd spoken to people individually, right? So it took us, 6-7 days, but we got it done and we moved it forward, and we're still figuring that piece out. So number one is, it's okay to be queasy inside. It's okay to be nervous that, who am I, type of thing. But on the other hand, you have to show some strength. And then when you, as the leader, the strength that you show is by making decisions, right? Then they're tough decisions. And you have to speak to people to make sure they're the right decisions. You can't be so arrogant to always say, I know what's best, right? We all know people like that, right? I know what's best. Every time you have a conversation with them, they have to one-up you because they know better than everyone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm assuming that most people watching my video are normal, Okay, I don't know what the statistics. I'm sure my H.com guys will give me the statistics on how many people in the world are normal. But that normal people, you gotta when you gotta lead, you gotta show strength. And number two is you have to give people direction. One of the things I always like to quote, right? This is I think it's one of the best quotes in the world. But when Alice in Wonderland. Bet you weren't expecting that quote, right? Alice in Wonderland, when she's talking to the Cheshire Cat, right? And Alice in Wonderland is talking to the Cheshire Cat, and the cat says to her, right? If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. I'm going to repeat that because it's one of my favorite. I'm sure you're going to hear it on many more episodes, assuming I get renewed. If you don't know where you're going, then any road's going to get you there. Right? And what that means is, okay, so we're going to sum it up. We're coming here to the end. I got 25 minutes I got to get this all into before the next episode. And one is I have confidence. I'm confident, okay? I'm going to show confidence. I could be scared inside, but you know what? I got to get this done. This is my job, right? I'm confident, right? Number two is I'm going to be decisive. I'm going to be decisive. We got to make some decisions. And I'm going to be decisive. And number three, know where you're going. Know what your goals are, right? Know where you want to wind up, because then we could figure out different directions to get there. Okay, so if you could do those three things, my friends, okay, and assuming you're normal, which we already put into the mix, but if you could do those three things, if you can say, I'm going to portray confidence, okay, I'm going to portray confidence that to my folks, I'm not going to that they can respect me and know that I'm thinking rationally, which is important. People think irrationally doesn't work. And, we could come up with a strategy and we could set that goal, right? And we can make decisions along the way. Then you'll do great. Then you'll do great. And we're coming down to the 2-minute mark here. So I want to say that this is, like I said, forget nonprofit, get for-profit. This is just our lives. This is our lives. And Corona gives us a chance to just take a step back and put all these into play. There's a lot to be scared of, my friends, but you know what? There's a lot to celebrate and enjoy. Our relationships with our family, with the Almighty, our Creator, with so many great things. Enjoy those things, but also set goals. Have that confidence, but set goals. Where do I want to wind up in life? Don't wind up at the end of your life looking back and saying, oh, I wish I had done so many things differently. Know where you want to go in life. What type of person you want to be. What type of, father or mother you want to be. What type of brother or sister. What type of child. What type of everything. Who do you want to be? Right? Now is the time. People have time. We're home. Focus. Think about this. And use these things. Get yourself in a certain level of confidence that you can move forward. Figure out your goals where you wind up, and let's figure out what the steps are that they're going to get us there. Because this is really what life's about. We're born and we die, and what we do in between is so precious. It's so precious because none of us know how much time we have here. And that's coming through, really straight on 2020 to every single one of us. So I just want to tell all you, my friends, my new friends, my old friends, it's been great spending this time with you. I hope that you've gained from this. I hope that we'll be able to continue this series and have more conversations. I gave you my information, and I think I'm going to start setting up, maybe even some free coaching, some stuff like that, to start to talk to people, because I believe this is the time that we have to reach out to each other. We have to try and build each other and spend time with each other. Thank you so much. Thank you, h.com/live. Everyone should tune into everything. It's the greatest content, the greatest group of folks in the world. And thank you. God bless.